In the summer of 1997, one of the most powerful technology companies in America stood at a crossroads. Inside its headquarters, executives were facing a decision that seemed almost insignificant compared to the billion-dollar battles being fought across the industry. The internet was growing fast, personal computers were entering millions of homes, and a new generation of companies was racing to define the future. Yet hidden beneath the excitement was a choice that would quietly reshape the technology world for decades. At the time, nobody called it a historic mistake. Nobody believed they were about to hand away one of the most valuable opportunities in business history. In fact, many of the people involved were convinced they were making the rational decision. The company already had what most businesses dreamed of. It had brand recognition, market dominance, billions in revenue, and direct access to millions of customers. Investors trusted it. Competitors feared it. Industry analysts viewed it as one of the safest bets in technology. And then a small opportunity appeared. It did not arrive with headlines. It did not look revolutionary. It did not seem capable of changing the future. To many executives, it looked like a distraction, a side project, a product with limited commercial potential. Something interesting, perhaps, but not important. What happened next would become one of the most expensive strategic errors ever recorded. Years later, business schools would study it. Investors would point to it as a warning. Technology leaders would use it as an example of how even the smartest organizations can fail to recognize the future when it is standing directly in front of them. The most shocking part was not what the company lost. It was what someone else gained. Because while one corporation walked away from the opportunity, another saw something entirely different. Where one side saw risk, the other saw possibility.
Where one side saw a small product, the other saw the foundation of a new empire. The consequences would spread far beyond a single company. Entire industries would be transformed, new billionaires would emerge, old market leaders would collapse, consumer behavior would change, the balance of power inside Silicon Valley would shift. And the technology landscape that exists today would look completely different had that single decision gone the other way. This is not the story of a company that failed because it lacked money. It is not the story of a company that failed because it lacked talent. It is the story of how intelligence, experience, and success can sometimes become the very things that prevent people from seeing what comes next. One decision, one missed opportunity, one moment that looked ordinary at the time, and a price tag that would eventually reach into the hundreds of billions of dollars.
The question is simple. How did one of the smartest companies in technology history fail to recognize the future before anyone else did? And how did that mistake help create one of the most powerful forces the industry has ever seen? To understand how this mistake happened, it is necessary to go back to a time when the internet looked nothing like it does today. The modern digital economy did not exist. Online shopping was still viewed as a niche activity. Most people used the internet for email, basic websites, and simple searches. The idea that a website could become one of the most valuable businesses on Earth sounded unrealistic to many executives, investors, and analysts. The dominant technology companies of the era were focused on different priorities. Their attention was on software, operating systems, hardware sales, enterprise contracts, and traditional sources of revenue. The internet was growing quickly, but nobody could fully agree on how money would be made from it. Many companies understood that the web was important. Far fewer understood how important it would become. Among those companies was Yahoo. By the mid-1990s, Yahoo had become one of the most recognizable names on the internet. For millions of people, it was the front door to the web. Users visited Yahoo to find news, sports scores, financial information, entertainment content, email services, and links to other websites. It was more than a search engine. It was a digital destination. Its growth was explosive. As internet adoption accelerated, Yahoo's audience expanded alongside it. Advertisers followed the traffic, revenue increased, investors saw the company as one of the biggest winners of the internet revolution. In many ways, Yahoo appeared perfectly positioned for the future. The company already had what countless startups desperately wanted: users. lots of them. Every day, millions of people were arriving on Yahoo's pages. The challenge was not attracting attention. The challenge was deciding what to do with it. Inside the company, leaders were trying to answer a question that many internet businesses faced during that era. Should they focus on becoming technology companies, or should they become media companies? The distinction may sound subtle, but it would shape the future of the industry. Technology companies built platforms, infrastructure, and tools that scaled with user growth. Media companies focused on content, advertising, audience engagement, and partnerships. Yahoo increasingly leaned toward the media model. Executives believed the company's greatest strength was its ability to attract and keep large audiences. At the same time, a different problem was quietly emerging across the internet. People were creating more websites than ever before. The amount of information online was exploding. Finding relevant information was becoming harder. Early search tools often produced poor results. Users frequently had to sort through pages of irrelevant links. The web was growing faster than existing search technologies could manage. Most internet companies recognized the problem. Very few had a solution. Then, inside a university research project, a new idea began to take shape. Instead of simply counting keywords or organizing websites into categories, two graduate students developed a system that evaluated the importance of web pages based on how they connected to one another. The approach produced search results that were dramatically more useful than many existing alternatives. At first, it looked like an academic experiment, nothing more. The project had no global brand, it had no massive user base, it generated no meaningful revenue. It was simply a better search technology. But better technology can be dangerous to established companies because it often arrives disguised as something small. The founders believed their innovation could transform the way people navigated the internet. What they lacked was scale. What they lacked was distribution. What they lacked was access to the millions of users already concentrated inside companies like Yahoo. And that is what made the opportunity so extraordinary. One side possessed the audience, the other possessed the breakthrough. Together, they had the ingredients to dominate the future of the internet. The problem was that only one side fully understood the value of what was sitting on the table. The opportunity arrived in a form that now seems almost impossible to believe. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the creators of the search technology that would later become Google, were not initially determined to build a global corporation. Like many founders in the earliest stages of innovation, they were focused on their technology itself. Their search engine was attracting attention among researchers and early internet users, but turning a breakthrough idea into a sustainable business was a completely different challenge. Running search infrastructure required money. Expanding it required even more. Servers had to be purchased, data centers had to grow, engineers had to be hired. Meanwhile, established internet companies already possessed massive audiences and deep financial resources. From the perspective of the founders, selling the technology seemed like a logical possibility. From the perspective of Yahoo, acquiring it should have looked like an extraordinary bargain. But the acquisition never happened. What followed would become one of the most remarkable growth stories in business history. Instead of becoming a feature inside someone else's platform, Google became its own company. At first, the contrast between Google and Yahoo could not have been more dramatic. Yahoo's homepage was crowded with content, news, categories, advertisements, and links. The company wanted visitors to stay within its ecosystem for as long as possible. Google offered something radically different. A nearly empty page, a logo, a search box, nothing else. Many observers initially viewed the simplicity as a weakness. Internet companies were competing to capture user attention and maximize page views. Google appeared to be doing the opposite. Yet users immediately noticed something important. The search results were better. Not slightly better, noticeably better. People who used Google often found what they were looking for faster than they could on competing platforms. As word spread, usage began to grow. Then it accelerated. The growth was driven by something every technology company dreams of but very few achieve. People recommended it to each other.
Friends told friends. Students told classmates. Employees told coworkers. Google was not growing because of expensive marketing campaigns. It was growing because users genuinely preferred the product. The more people searched, the more data Google collected. The more data it collected, the better its systems became. The better the systems became, the more users arrived. A powerful feedback loop had formed. While competitors focused on becoming internet destinations, Google focused on becoming the fastest route to information. That distinction changed everything. As the internet expanded, the need for reliable search expanded with it. Every new website, every new article, every new business listing increased the value of Google's core product. The company was not simply benefiting from internet growth, it was becoming essential to navigating the internet itself. Investors began paying attention. Advertisers soon followed. Then came another breakthrough. Rather than relying solely on traditional display advertising, Google developed a system that connected advertisements directly to search intent. Someone searching for a product could immediately see relevant commercial offers. Businesses could target potential customers at the exact moment they were looking for information. The model was extraordinarily effective. Advertisers received measurable results, users received relevant information, Google generated revenue on a scale that few had anticipated. What had started as a search engine was rapidly becoming an economic engine. Revenue surged, hiring accelerated, infrastructure expanded across continents. Competitors found themselves fighting a battle that became harder every year. Many internet companies had larger brands, many had more content, many had started earlier. But increasingly, none of that mattered, because users kept choosing Google. By the early 2000s, the company's influence was spreading far beyond search. Its name was becoming a verb. People no longer said they would look something up online. They said they would Google it. That kind of cultural adoption is rare. It represents more than popularity. It represents dominance. Meanwhile, the gap between Google and its rivals continued to widen. Search quality improved. Advertising revenue multiplied. New products emerged. Engineers from around the world wanted to work there. Investors viewed the company as one of the most important businesses in technology. The transformation was breathtaking. A project that one established company had considered non-essential was evolving into the central gateway of the internet. Every year that passed made the original opportunity appear larger. Every year made the decision to walk away seem harder to explain. And as Google's power expanded, another reality was becoming impossible to ignore. The company that could have owned this technology was no longer leading the future. It was beginning to chase it. As Google's rise accelerated, the original decision not to acquire the company began to look increasingly significant. But the most fascinating part of the story is that the warning signs did not arrive all at once. They emerged gradually, almost quietly, hidden beneath a technology market that was changing faster than anyone had anticipated. From the outside, Yahoo still appeared powerful. The company remained one of the most visited destinations on the internet. Its brand was recognized around the world. It had partnerships, advertising relationships, media properties, and millions of loyal users. Financially, it was still a major force. Inside the company, many strategic decisions seemed entirely reasonable. Yahoo's leadership believed users wanted a complete online experience. News, sports, finance, entertainment, email, shopping, messaging, and search could all exist under one roof. The goal was to become the internet's central destination, a place where people would spend as much time as possible. At the time, this was not an irrational vision. In fact, many investors supported it. The longer users stayed on Yahoo's properties, the more advertising could be sold. More content meant more engagement. More engagement meant more revenue. It was a model that had worked exceptionally well in traditional media. The problem was that the internet was beginning to reward a different philosophy. Google was not trying to keep users inside an ecosystem of content. It was helping them leave as quickly as possible. A user typed a question, Google provided an answer, the user moved on. This approach seemed counterintuitive. Conventional business logic suggested that reducing time spent on a platform would reduce value.
Yet Google was creating value in a different way. Every successful search strengthened trust, and trust became one of the most valuable assets on the internet. Gradually, user behavior started shifting. People no longer wanted directories filled with categories. They no longer wanted editors deciding which websites deserved attention. The web had become too large. Search was becoming the primary way people interacted with information. This shift created a dangerous imbalance. Yahoo still viewed search as one component of a larger strategy. Google increasingly viewed search as the strategy. The distinction appeared subtle. Its consequences were enormous. As Google invested relentlessly in improving search quality, Yahoo continued expanding across multiple business categories. New products launched. Acquisitions were completed. Partnerships grew. The company was active in many areas at once. Google remained obsessed with one thing: finding information better than anyone else. The focus created momentum. The momentum created scale. The scale created dominance. Soon, Google was processing vast amounts of user behavior that helped improve its systems even further. Every search strengthened the machine. Every query generated additional insight. Every improvement attracted more users. The cycle became increasingly difficult for competitors to break. Meanwhile, Yahoo faced a growing challenge that many successful companies encounter. Past victories began influencing future decisions. When an organization achieves extraordinary success, the strategies that created that success often gain enormous internal credibility. Leaders naturally trust systems that have worked before. Investors expect continuity. Employees build careers around existing priorities. Changing direction becomes harder, not because people lack intelligence, because success itself creates momentum. Yahoo's executives were operating within a framework that had produced remarkable results. Their assumptions were not unreasonable. Their forecasts were not irrational. They were making decisions based on the information available at the time. But markets do not reward logic alone. They reward adaptation. And adaptation becomes difficult when the environment changes faster than the organization. The turning point became impossible to ignore when search advertising began transforming into one of the most profitable business models ever created. Google was no longer just attracting users. It was building a machine that converted attention into revenue with extraordinary efficiency. Every search represented intent. Every intent represented opportunity. And advertisers were willing to pay heavily for access to that opportunity. Suddenly, search was no longer a supporting feature. It was becoming the center of the internet economy. For Yahoo, this created a painful strategic dilemma. The company recognized the importance of search, but by then Google had already established a lead that grew stronger with each passing year. Attempting to catch up required more than investment. It required reversing years of momentum. And momentum is one of the hardest forces in business to overcome. The irony became increasingly visible. Years earlier, Yahoo had possessed exactly what Google needed: distribution. Now Google possessed exactly what Yahoo needed: technological leadership. The balance of power had reversed. By the time many observers fully appreciated what was happening, Google had evolved from a promising search company into a platform capable of shaping the future of the internet itself. The original missed opportunity was no longer measured in millions of dollars. It was no longer measured in billions. The value was expanding almost beyond calculation. What once appeared to be a small acquisition target was becoming one of the most powerful companies ever created. And the most painful realization was that the future had not been stolen. It had been offered. For a relatively small price, and then allowed to walk away. The years that followed transformed what had once been a competitive rivalry into a complete reordering of the technology industry. Google continued expanding with extraordinary speed. Search remained its foundation, But the company was no longer confined to a single product. It moved into advertising, mapping, mobile software, video, cloud infrastructure, productivity tools, and artificial intelligence. Each new initiative strengthened the ecosystem surrounding its core business. Each success generated more resources to fund the next one. The scale became staggering. What began as a university research project evolved into one of the most valuable corporations in history. Its influence reached billions of users across nearly every corner of the world. Entire industries adjusted their strategies around Google's products. Businesses optimized themselves to appear in its search results. Advertisers built marketing campaigns around its platforms. For many people, interacting with the internet increasingly meant interacting with systems Google controlled. Meanwhile, Yahoo's trajectory moved in the opposite direction. The company still possessed recognizable brands and valuable assets, but its position at the center of the internet gradually weakened. User behavior had changed, search had become dominant, mobile devices were reshaping how people accessed information. New competitors emerged across multiple categories. The internet Yahoo had helped pioneer no longer operated according to the assumptions that had fueled its early success. The challenge was not a lack of effort. Yahoo invested heavily. It launched products, it made acquisitions, it recruited talented executives, it attempted strategic reinventions. But every move took place against the backdrop of a market that had already chosen its new leaders. The gap continued widening. Eventually, the company that had once represented the future of the internet became a case study in how quickly leadership can disappear in technology. What makes this story remarkable is that Yahoo did not collapse because its executives were incompetent. They were not. They did not ignore innovation. They did not refuse to adapt. Many of their decisions made sense when viewed through the realities of the moment. The mistake was more subtle. They correctly identified that the internet would become enormous. They incorrectly identified where the greatest value would emerge. They believed content would be the center of the digital world. Google recognized that navigation would become the center. That difference changed everything. History often portrays transformative business decisions as obvious. Looking backward, outcomes appear inevitable. But at the moment choices are made, certainty rarely exists. Leaders operate with incomplete information. Markets shift unexpectedly. Consumer behavior evolves. Technologies mature in ways nobody fully predicts. That is what makes this story so enduring. The billion-dollar mistake was not simply passing on a company. It was misunderstanding the future. And in technology, misunderstanding the future can be more expensive than any acquisition, lawsuit, or failed product launch. Today, the value created by Google is measured not in billions, but in trillions. The opportunity that once appeared modest became one of the greatest wealth creation events of the modern era. What was offered for a relatively small price ultimately helped shape the digital economy of the 21st century. For Yahoo, the missed acquisition became a symbol. Not because one decision alone determined its fate, but because it captured a larger truth about innovation. The greatest threats rarely arrive looking powerful. The most disruptive ideas often appear unfinished, unproven, and easy to dismiss. By the time their importance becomes obvious, the window of opportunity is usually gone. In the end, empires are not guaranteed permanence. Market leadership is temporary. Dominance creates confidence, but confidence can become complacency. A breakthrough in a university lab can challenge corporations worth billions. A small team can alter the direction of an entire industry. And a decision that seems reasonable in one moment can redefine the next generation. Because in technology, power belongs only to those who can recognize the future before everyone else sees it. And sometimes, the most expensive mistake is not what a company builds. It's what it chooses not to buy. If you enjoyed this story and want more deep dives into the decisions, rivalries, and turning points that shape the modern world, subscribe to Inside Tech Empires. There is always another empire rising and another one falling.